Good evening, and welcome to the Local Control Subcommittee meeting. Today, Monday, June 10th, 2024, starting at 5:03. Calling this meeting to order. Roll call. Ms. LaFave.
Present.
Mr. Romero. Mayor Garcia.
Here.
Dr. Caballero Roca. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Flag, United States. God.
Just some housekeeping business. On March 29, 2023, Governor Healy signed into law a supplemental budget bill which, among other things, extends the temporary provisions pertaining to the open meeting law to March 31st, 2025. Specifically, this further extension allows public bodies to continue holding meetings remotely without a quorum of the public body physically present at a meeting location and to provide adequate alternative access to remote meetings. The language does not make any substantive changes to the open meeting law other than extending the expiration date of the temporary provisions regarding remote meetings from March 31st, 2023 to March 31st, 2025. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20, I'm hereby informing all attendees that a video and audio recording is being made of the meeting, and the meeting is being live streamed and run live on the city's community TV channel. Thank you so much. I want to acknowledge with us in the room is Mr. Callamore, Ms. Wilson, Ms. Tensley Williams, Student Rep Kennedy from Dean, and Mr. Soto. I also want to recognize Acting Commissioner Russell Johnston. Thank you so much for being here. We had a great conversation last time, as usual, where we were looking at our plans for collaboration, which is one of the pillars of creating a plan that is going to be not only enacted, but well received by everybody in the community. As part of following up from our previous meeting, as our item 1, we have our communication plan. So we have put together a draft communication for our Holyoke Public Schools community on the steps for collecting feedback on the transition plan. Commissioner Russell Johnston, did you have a chance to look over the draft?
Yes, thank you very much. Great as always to be here with you. And so we did have a chance to take a look at the draft, and I'm wondering actually if it might be helpful as a next step for, I'm wondering if this committee could appoint a member who could work with us more directly to discuss, kind of work on the draft together outside of this meeting and bring it back to this local control task force, this local control subcommittee in a follow-up meeting.
Absolutely. I'm more than welcome to work on this with you offline as well.
Excellent.
So we have Ms. LaFave.
I think we should put in a motion to appoint Dr. Yadilet Rivera Colon to work directly with the commissioner and the state off the regularly scheduled meeting dates to continue working on the transition plan.
Thank you, Ms. LaFave.
That's a motion.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. LaFave, seconded by Mayor Garcia.
And this is the communication plan we're talking about? We're in discussion, right? This is the communication.
Actually, it would be, I do apologize.
No, go ahead.
Commissioner, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It would actually be both. If we could work on, it's really helpful. Thank you so much. We have the draft, we reviewed it both for the communication plan and for the transition plan. And we would just very much appreciate the opportunity. We think it could be a very productive conversation just to delve into. At the end of the day, I think what we would like to see is just some more details added, details that we've talked about in these meetings, but just to add them into the plan a little bit further. So it would be sort of an additive conversation that we would anticipate having about both.
Remind me what the communication plan is. Is it just like the effort? Is it just right? All right. It's all that what we're doing and how we're going to roll it out, or
who would be involved, the stakeholders that would be reached,
Okay.
and the process. Yeah.
So we're talking about like the last meeting we talked about the collaborations and okay. So on that
Yes.
note, and what an appropriate time to talk about this and bring this up. I don't know if you saw the article on the Republican, actually I think it was just yesterday, from the union. Receivership muzzled this mass cities teachers union. It aims to be heard. That's what it's titled. And a lot of it is just like one important thing that they mentioned in the article is feeling not included in this conversation. And I don't know if whether or not they've been watching these meetings and listening into what we have been talking about, but in their minds, their perception, we're having this conversation with you without them, and they should be at the table. But what we're saying is we're coming up with a plan to include stakeholders, including the union. So I think there's definitely some miscommunication issues, or maybe they're not getting the information to, you know what I mean? So I definitely look up that article. And for anybody that's watching at home or any union member that's paying attention right now, we have every intention to include the voices of our union in this process. This is not this right here. This conversation with our local control subcommittee is not the moment, but we're getting there. And hopefully, Doctor and the Commissioner, you guys can draft up some sort of communication that helps clarify, when the appropriate time is to be part of this conversation for all stakeholders, our unions, student leaders, right, parents, and so forth. So there's this feeling that they're not being included when we have every intention to include. So I think there's just some misunderstanding or miscommunication on when that inclusionary process starts.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? Ms. Lefebvre.
I just want to say I'm going to validate, people's feelings. But at the same time, what I am going to say is the following. These meetings that have been happening where it's 1 hour every 2 weeks or what have you, it's not sufficient to really come up with a thorough plan. So the fact that we have appointed you to be the chair of the local control subcommittee, it is very imperative that you work directly with the state more offline so that when we come to these meetings, it's more of a productive meeting rather than trying to develop something, like come up with quick little things versus having a fruitful discussion about what you guys have been creating together. So the communication that is being sent out is actually to create an advisory committee, sort of a task force. So any subcommittee of a school committee only involves the school committee members.
Right.
That's what this local control subcommittee was created for. It's for the school board members. We assign specific ones to then work directly with the state. When we create that task force or that advisory committee, that's when we're looking for other stakeholders to provide input, to provide feedback. So then it comes back to the subcommittee, even though someone from the subcommittee should be assigned to also be part of that task force because you're getting the information right on real time. So that's just my personal opinion, but
No.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you're spot on. These meetings, conversations that we're having with the commissioner has been at the school board table, and the school board, since its retreat, when we had originally essentially had our retreat a couple months ago, we committed to making sure that there was a task force that includes the union to, and how we do that, we're trying to figure that out and when the appropriate time is. But for anybody that is paying attention and watching from home or from wherever, like we have every intent to be sure that we include folks at the table in that conversation. I think that a lot of the members, I think they're newly elected members to the union, and maybe we can do a introduction, come meet the school board, because I'd love to meet them too, or whatever the case, just for the introductory purpose, so we can start off on the right foot. But I think it was critical that, this was a good time to kind of clarify that, so that, we want a collaborative, culture here in this transition as we all try to figure this out, because we're building the airplane as we go. There's no path or model to follow, and certainly appreciate the commissioner himself coming to the table, trying to figure this out with us. And this is something to celebrate at this stage.
Thank you. We still need to vote on the motion. So, all in favor?
Aye.
So moved, because that's all of us. Thank you so much. Something that I wanted to add also about working on these documents, that I just want to, for the sake of how they're described in the agenda, so that would be the draft communication for the Holyoke Public Schools community on steps for collecting feedback on the transition plan. We also have the recruitment email for the task force in order to be able to send it to everybody and be able to have representatives from different parts of our community, as well as the collaboration section of the plan in order for us to discuss and refine that engagement of the public. So those are the drafts that we have included in the agenda and that will be discussed offline. In order for this to be in working order for us to be able to do this, we have to make sure that those offline communications happen relatively fast, because these meetings happen every other week. So that means that as soon as we're done here, we should be planning when we're going to talk, so that then we can actually get the agenda ready in a reasonable amount of time, so that then the public has a chance to be able to see. And then we get to discuss it with the full school committee, because they also need to be apprised of what's going on. So what I'm trying to say is, like, I'm going to have to hold you accountable and make sure that you're going to be available, because I know that you're really busy, but this is something that we need to do as we are really close to the end of our scheduled meetings for the local control plan.
And Madam Chair, if I could.
Yes, Commissioner. Go ahead.
So, we're a team, even though, it is really important that I come here and present and certainly contributing. And I also am backed up by amazing team members who I will likely I would probably have you work with a member of our team instead of directly with me on this. So that we can move with that speed that you're talking about. And, I assure you that it would be we work together really closely. There's nothing that we'd be suggesting that I'm not 100% supportive of. And again, our effort is really just to flesh out a little bit more. We feel like these conversations have been rich, and we just want to make sure that we are capturing the richness of these conversations directly in that plan. And I think that instead of us just going in and marking up a document, sort of talking things through with you first, will lead to kind of a quick, some quick additions to our plans for engagement and the plans for transition, which are all included in that one document.
Thank you so much. So our item 2, which is the topic of this meeting, is back on school committee capacity building. This is going to be on hiring and evaluating the superintendent. So right now, things that we have been involved with in that process We have been part of the 360 evaluation of the receiver. We also acknowledge that we have received the state's evaluation for informational purposes. We've had that in our agendas before. There is a process for making recommendation to the commissioner in connection with the receiver's annual performance evaluation. And that's about all the involvement we've had in terms of evaluation in general. And we would need to then discuss what additional considerations we're going to do. And I know that there's a big elephant in the room about when and how we are going to be looking for a superintendent. So I don't want to be dismissive in that. But we also need not only a plan, but also to be trained in the process on how to do this as well.
Talking about the evaluations?
For hiring and evaluating the superintendent.
Go. Sorry. Yeah, I was going to say, so in the plan, I think our policy outlines our responsibility of hiring and also evaluating the superintendent. So, making clear that we agree to the language that's in there. But and then there's also and I know folks have heard me say this before, the school board should be able to make the decision as to what we want to do. When local control ends, it doesn't mean we need to do it unless law says otherwise, and I'll look to the commissioner to clarify that. And if we don't need to, as a body, should have a conversation as to whether or not we want to do that, or do we want to keep our current superintendent? Do we want to post and search for a new superintendent? As a body, I think we should make that decision. Maybe we can come up with a recommendation here, or maybe no recommendation, but at some point the school board should together make that decision, and then the decision is what it is. If we're going to post and search, or do we not want to focus on that? Personally, I think we should focus on the transition more than rocking the boat too much, where we're now adding the search and interviewing of superintendents. But that, again, that's personally speaking, and I don't represent the whole body, so I certainly want to hear what other committee members want to say, how they feel about it.
Thank you. Ms. Lefebvre.
I think where we need to get a clarification and an understanding is in respects to Superintendent Soto. How does it work? When, obviously, whoever comes out first, be it if it was Lawrence, be it if it was Holyoke, whomever.
Yeah.
When it comes to the current superintendent / receiver, when it goes back into local control, because technically the superintendent is the employee of the state, wouldn't that prevent them from continuing as serving as a superintendent within a district once the district regains control? Because wouldn't they have to apply then to be hired by the district? So that's where I think a lot of us need to get clarification. I can see a transition. We're still not out of control, out of local control. There's still a working relationship between both the state and the school committee officials. But it might be like, let's say it's a 50-50, right? 50% control on the school committee side, 50% control on the state side. So obviously we'd still have the superintendent. But when it becomes now where it's school committee now has full control because he's an employee of the state, not for the district, doesn't that prevent him from continuing on? Wouldn't that prevent, let's just put it in general terms, wouldn't that prevent a superintendent from continuing in their current role with the district because we are no longer in state control, state receivership. That's where we need clarification.
Commissioner Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a very good question. So, like you said, Madam Chair, I just really appreciate the sensitivity of this conversation, mainly just because we have such respect for Receiver Superintendent Soto. And so let's talk about this. This isn't about the person, it's really about the process. And I just having been a superintendent, I just know how, you put a lot of work and so much effort into this position. And so just talking about it, is very personal. So I just want to start there, but let's go to the facts. So let's separate out receiver from superintendent, and talk about the role right now is receiver. And as you said, Ms. Lefebvre, he is, the receivers are all employees of the state, or our two receivers right now in the state who are individual receivers in Southbridge and Holyoke are both employees of the state. A district cannot be without a superintendent. So, the receiver has the authority of the superintendent. So right now you have a receiver who is a state employee. And what we have to do through this transition process is be very thoughtful about the kind of advanced planning. We don't need to decide now, like Mayor Garcia was saying.
Right.
It'll really be up to the school committee to have that conversation. But I think it would be good to begin to get an idea of, the sort of timing for beginning to have those conversations at the school committee level. But what we would likely do is probably, this is one of the most important things that has to be in place. So we would probably announce, let's just say that from whatever date we pick, that, many months before the end of receivership, we would say, receivership is likely to end on this particular date. And that way we can begin a process of starting that transition to, having a superintendent process that has to get underway and usually takes a little while, although it varies. But we want to make sure there's plenty of time, no pressure on the school committee in terms of having to race to figure out who the superintendent is. We have this opportunity to figure this out with plenty of time on our side. And so what I would suggest is, we sort of begin to tentatively think about a date by which we would want the school committee to have this conversation. And it might be something like, in the fall, that there is a conversation about next steps on superintendency. Now, of course, it does require, the state to make an announcement to help to kick off that process further. But that there'd be a process. You would start to work to name the superintendent. This would be something we'd be working really closely on. My interest would be that it goes well, that there's a good plan for this, a plan that I can stand behind. But the whole plan does not have to be decided now. You would execute the plan. You would, have negotiations with the person identified as the incoming superintendent, and because it is a different role, right? So I'm saying incoming superintendent because it's not the receiver anymore. The person in the role of receiver. And so we would have that date by which the superintendent would start. And what we would do is, basically end receivership at 11:59 on a certain date. And then at 12 o'clock, the receivership is over and the superintendent position comes into place because we literally cannot be without a superintendent at any time. I hope that wasn't too long-winded, and certainly, ask any questions that you need to ask, but it would not prevent anyone currently serving in the receivership role then to continue on as superintendent. It just has to be planned for.
Right. Okay. So that's the whole thing. That's exactly where I'm trying to get at. So at the end of the day, once local control, the district has local control, we cannot be obviously without a superintendent, but we can also, if we did not do a superintendent search or anything, we wouldn't be able to continue having, let's say, a current receiver / superintendent continue the role while we have full control, but we're having full control on other things. At the end of the day, we we'd have to already have the superintendent identified to continue that role once it said that effective this date, Holyoke or whomever has control of their district. It's full control of the district. It's no longer under state receivership. That's where I think a lot of us were asking, like, okay, do we go ahead and if say we get out of receivership, but we continue with a current receiver, still as a superintendent, just so that we don't go through that process yet until we get everything else kind of done. No, it's like that is really like the first thing that technically has to be done, and then everything else can be focused on. So thank you for the clarification. That's where we were wondering.
Mayor Garcia.
Yeah, Commissioner, I think a lot of us we know that this is a critical part, and folks have different perspectives and opinions, but we need to know what will be helpful from you is to help us understand what we can and can't do. So, there was members that thought if we leave, we have to do a process. We have to do a search. Well, do we have to? Because in my other opinions, we have the appointing authority. Obviously, best practice, right? If a superintendent retires and we're going to do best practice is to do a search, but do we have to? Can we just through a vote of the body vote for whatever circumstances or reason? I think we just need to understand what we can and can't do by law, and then once we understand those parameters, at that point, folks can make a conscious decision as to whether or not they want to vote on, yes, let's do a process, because on such and such date, 11:59, we're not going to have whether or not we can appoint an interim instead, and or if it's the will of the body, it's who we maybe we vote on keeping the current superintendent, or maybe offering a 3-year contract, or whatever the case might be. We just got to know on our end, what are the governing parameters around us, so that we can it helps us, make our decision.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there are kind of two questions there. The first is really about the authority, because right now the school committee, as you have been, you can meet, you can advise, but actually, taking action is something that you are not allowed to do under the receivership law. And so we would need to be clear about delegating that authority to the school committee, because just like you're saying, for practical reasons, we need to make sure that it's very clear that this school committee does have the authority to appoint a new superintendent, and we want that, right? This needs to be the local decision. So we really endorse that the process that the school committee will go to. But that brings us to the second question, which is, and I appreciate the kind of the factual way that you put it. Does DESE require a search, or could there be an appointment? We would not. There is not a specific requirement either way. I would just, obviously we would make sure that we are in close communication about even if it's an appointment or a full search, let's call it the process. So whichever process the school committee is going to take, I would just want to make sure that we are just as you would be, an open and clear communication. It would have to be, like you were saying, at a meeting of the school committee to make a decision about how to proceed. And, we would be watching to see and supportive of, a thoughtful process and a thoughtful determination about what's best for the district at this time. So I would say as your question is, full search or appointment, options are on the table. There's no kind of specific requirement or restriction. We would just want to make sure that, again, that it's done publicly and openly in terms of the decision that's ultimately made.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Any other follow-ups to that?
This is a great conversation.
Yes. No, definitely fruitful conversation and a lot of questions answered that we had before. So that's really great. And thank you, Ms. LaFave, for that.
Madam Chair, if I could just add one more thing.
Yes, please.
Thanks so much. The other consideration is there are certain, work regarding, especially when it relates to a contract that's done in executive session versus open session, and contract development with a new superintendent, for example, is the school committee being able to deliberate the terms of a contract is done in executive session. So it's also good to be thinking about what will be done in open session, what will be done in executive session, and just preparing the school committee for both, because in any instance, there will be a combination of both executive and open sessions as it relates to the hiring and contracting with a superintendent.
Thank you. One other thing that, as I was going through and looking at the process in general, and Ms. LaFave will be able to tell us a bit about what happened in the past, because she's one of the members who has been here longer. If we must have a subcommittee for the hiring and evaluation process in order to present to the full committee, or is that something that the full committee can do as a whole? Ms. LaFave.
If I'm not mistaken, there was like a subcommittee, but you can also hire outside organization to help with the hiring process. So, they'd post it, whatever, people apply. Then the subcommittee would then determine who are our top 3, top 4, I don't know, whichever. Then it goes in front of the full board, where then the full board will then vote who they choose after the interview. I know there's been a lot of things happening across the Commonwealth. I'm just going to put it that way. Where now it's more people want to be involved in this process. I get it. And again, that goes back to then creating the task force then. At the end of the day, is creating that task force or advisory committee, so they can go ahead and ask questions, whoever, of the candidates, and then at the end of the day, the decision is solely on the school committee. So.
Thank you, Ms. LaFave. And a follow-up question, since I have you here, is since we're thinking about how to include collaboration and stakeholder input, you mentioned the advisory committee. I think that then before, and this is just me thinking on the spot, so I'm just talking out loud, based on our current policy for leading the search, we probably should have in our plan to revisit that and work on the policy to include the voices of the task force. Am I in the right track, or do we not have to do that?
So, this is my opinion. Reusing the same people that we use for other things, again, you're eliminating other voices, right? Students are key in this. Families. So we can look at our parent organizations. We have the ELL PAC, Special Education PAC. You have the District Parent Advisory Council. Then when you're looking at the people that we are collaborating with in the community, so we have the South Holyoke Neighborhood Initiative, we have Homework House, Boys and Girls Club, and the list goes on. It's you want to make sure that you not always use the same person because everybody has different experiences. So let's say that we take stakeholders from the South Holyoke Neighborhood Initiative, and then and Homework House. Then I think for this other one, we should be looking at your Boys and Girls Club, Girls Inc., whomever it is that because you can't make this become such a huge advisory committee of 30 and 40 people because it's not going to be productive at the end of the day. Do we want to get the feedback? Absolutely. So you request for that feedback that people can email back. I know that we did, as a matter of fact, when we had different sessions when we were going to be taken over by the state, and there was one at Holyoke High School. There was set up at different locations, and as school committee members, we all attended, but we couldn't be together with the same group because then that would be a conflict with the open meeting law. So some might go to one group who was discussing, like, what would you like to see in a superintendent? And now they're doing this, they're writing on these big Post-its. This other group might say, what are some of the qualities that are specific to you that you want to see in a superintendent? And then all that information from all the different areas where it was done was collected, right? And then obviously the state reviewed it because they came back and gave us Dr. Reich out of it. So, and he wasn't even a Holyoke person. But at the end of the day, he made himself a Holyoke person. And we were very grateful for that. Because, as we had mentioned, it's not about, you having specifically have to be from here. It was, are you willing to learn about the people of Holyoke? Are you willing to engage and just really learn about our whole community? And that man went above and beyond. Okay? So we were very grateful. So that, though, they were not sitting at the table. That information was then given to the local stakeholder group, who was then discussing. So that's why I'm saying there are ways to get this feedback from the community. We have so many events that we have throughout. The South Holyoke Neighborhood Initiative is always doing events. We should be there. Get some feedback from them, even if it's a little survey. However we want to do it, there's always an event. And especially now towards the end of the year. The summer is going to be the real hardest, right? So then, yeah, this may be going on until August or September, but guess what? Now open houses will be coming in soon, so those are events that we could be at, getting feedback, but then that advisory group is getting that feedback. And technically, it's not what their opinion is of what they want, it's what they're hearing from the community and coming back with something that everybody can kind of buy into, right? Because it's a collective of the community's voice. Not about me. It's not about you. It's about what the people want.
Great.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lefebvre. Anything else on item 2 before we move forward? Commissioner, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that at the beginning of the conversation, we were talking about the superintendent evaluation, and I don't know if you were going there next. I do apologize. But that is something worth looking into further and perhaps even thinking about a training for the school committee on that, maybe even for next year, so that when we do have this changeover, the school committee would then get involved with the goal setting and the process, which is unique and is something that's worth being ready for at the end of receivership. So just want to keep that on the table. That is a clear, to me, that's a very clear action item for the school committee to work on in this next year.
Absolutely. And that's definitely in our list of things as well. So definitely having that training so that we know what we're doing, not saying that we don't, but to make sure that we have a plan that makes sense and that we know what we need to do when the time comes. Ms. LaFave.
Yeah, and so what was done previously, and I'm not saying that we have to do it as previous, but yes, when it comes to training, obviously MASC can provide us a training. But we used to have the chair of, I believe it was the governance committee, if I'm not mistaken. Was it the governance committee? They created the evaluation and then submitted it to all of the school committee members. We had to put in, they collected that information and then brought back to the school committee the results from everyone's responses. So it's the creation of that. So yes, do we need the training on that? Yeah, because we're going to have to look. We have our turnaround plan, but it's also about goal setting. So when you get back get back control of the district, it's about making sure that we have also looked at our goal setting and what goals we want to see for the superintendent to do, as well as what the school committee is going to be doing. And not only should we be evaluating the superintendent, it'll be an evaluation of the school committee as well.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Ms. LaFave. And I have to say that also we have a great set of questions as well that we have received through the 360 evaluation as well that had really nice categories as well. So we have a wealth of information on how we can move forward if that's the way that we end up going, for sure. Okay. Any other considerations on this item before we move forward? Commissioner Johnston, go ahead.
So that piece would go into about the evaluation would training on the evaluation system for the school committee would go into the transition plan.
Correct.
I just want to make sure we're really clear on that. Great.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. If there's no more discussion on that, before we move on to item number 3, I just want to make sure that I take a second and give a shout out to Aaron Linville, who really helped us put together the draft documents that we didn't get to discuss tonight, but that we will be working on offline, because she really did that lightning speed to make sure that we had them today. So I really want to make sure that I give her a shout out, because she made them really fast with all the recommendations and everything that we talked about. So thank you if you're listening. Okay. So any next steps that we need besides incorporating what we talked about into our ongoing plan? Anything else? I want to make sure that I don't forget anything before we move to our minute. Mayor Garcia.
We're good.
Okay.
Roll.
Thank you so much. So item number 4, approval of the May 13, 2024 meeting minutes.
Motion approved.
That's Mayor Garcia on the motion. Second,
Second.
Ms. LaFave. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Our minutes have been approved. And we have made it to the end of our agenda. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Ms. Lauren Wu and Commissioner Johnston, for being here. Thank you to all the committee members. So, motion to adjourn.
You have anything else?
Did you have any closing comments before we adjourn, Commissioner Johnston?
Thank
Commissioner,
you. No, just continued gratitude for the openness of these conversations, the good questioning back and forth, and the good resolutions that we're coming to together. So thanks very much.
hey, Commissioner, I was doing a radio interview this morning, and it was too early, and for the life of me, I couldn't remember your name. So if I ever get back to you, I was just like,
We've
oh,
all
the
been
commission. I'm so sorry. It's you replaced Riley.
We've all been.
It was too
we've
early.
all-
I haven't had my coffee. I just came back from vacation, and I was just like, all right, what are we doing?
Yeah, whatever his name is. I love it. That's great. No, I appreciate it. And it'll happen to me tomorrow. So no worries.
Motion to adjourn?
That was Ms. LaFave on the motion.
Second.
The Mayor Garcia, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you so much. And we have adjourned at 5:48 p.m.
Thank you.